Welcome to Two Paed Chiros with Christian Fludder and Mike Marinus.
Hello and welcome to Two Paed Chiros. It is myself, Mike Marinus, and of course my partner in crime, Dr. Christian Fludder. How are you, my friend?
I'm very welcome. I'm very welcome. Oh, that's a great start. I'm very well, thanks, Mike. See, I contracted everything there in
Hmm.
this in a way of trying to save time, just to and you've sipped on the right thing. I feel like I may be lacking in caffeine, and that's where
Mm,
we're seeing that kind of response coming through.
yeah,
Mike, I'm doing great. Thanks very
good. I'm
much.
glad. You tried to save time and it just didn't work. I'm
Well,
welcoming.
if anyone knows me, I enjoy a good waffle, and so both a food type and the tangential
About to
talking type
say.
of stuff. So yeah. So if yes, I will stop talking now.
It is wonderful to be back. It's good to be able to chat with you again, loyal and happy listener. I hope we find you here. Pete's people tend to be happy people. I find we had a meeting last night where we were talking about all different aspects of chiropractic, and we were talking about, whenever pediatric people get together, be it at a symposium or a talk or whatever, it's always, we tend to be nice, kind. It's really interesting because you would suppose that we'd just be like these little terrors in the sandpit, but we're not. We're actually quite lovely people.
I find that you're very correct. It's a very astute observation. I've only come across one pediatrician he was a great pediatrician, brilliant pediatrician, just absolutely terrible with children. And it really confused so many parents. He would be, sit down, be quiet, very abrupt. He's a very mean demeanor. But jeepers, he was like House. That TV
Oh,
series House. Yeah, he was just like that. He knew everything.
dude,
But
this is what the world needs is House the Pediatrician spin-off.
oh,
This is what we need. It's what we're lacking at the moment.
there you go. There you go.
It'll be like, it's never reflux. I love it.
No,
Instead of
exactly.
lupus.
Exactly.
Oh
Oh
my,
well, come on, mate. You got the face for it. You can jump onto some UK TV over there. Can't wait,
oh my
wait. You can
goodness.
jump on TV again. Isn't that right?
Uh, yeah, yeah, oh my goodness. I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't, yeah. I mean, one day when this show gets syndicated to TV, because that's obviously where it's going to go. Yeah, I mean, it'll be great. We'll just be sitting there waxing lyrical on TV with, about all things pediatric. It'll be fantastic. I look very forward to that, actually. It's my master plan.
I like this. Good ambitions. Good
Yeah,
ambitions.
exactly. Shoot for the stars. You hit something.
Eventually, it takes a while. I had that great conversation come through. One of my kids, he's like he's going to be an astronaut. He's just that right type of ASD kind of brain who just knows
Mm.
all the facts. And he came in and it was great. He sat there and he goes, Christian, if you aim for the sun, you're more likely to miss it than hit it. And
Ah,
I've gone, how? And they go, yeah,
yeah,
there's a very specific, it's if you just don't get it quite right, it'll boom and miss and slingshot and all kinds of stuff.
yeah,
And I've said, that's incredible to think that something so enormous, we can
yeah.
still miss it so easily.
But that finding, I've got a little guy that's got pandas, and he's really, really interesting chap. Very ticky, but very, very, very right-brained. I mean, he's left-brained, sorry, he's facts, he's figures, and the thing is, I was messing around with him one day and I made this horrible error. So like I generally mess around with him and I'll say like, they'll say like, when is it over? And I'll be like, just count to purple. And they'll be like, and
Ah,
kind of mess around with him. And I remember saying something about, oh, like 50 times 212. And he was like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, hang on a second. And his mom was like, he's right. I was like, okay, we're going to test this. I was like, And what about this? And what about that? And all of a sudden, I'm being completely, which is not difficult, but I'm being completely mathematically outmatched by like a 9-year old, just taking me apart. And you start to realize, like, this is what they mean, where like he's a fish, but we all live in a tree. And if the world was just organized around him and around the way his brain could interact, we'd all be in trouble because he would just take over. But because the world isn't, he's seen as needing extra, or he's seen as not what he should be in the mainstream. And that always gets me, man.
Yeah, it's that whole neurodivergent type of explanation behind things. And it used to be, I actually quite like, have you had that shift across over there where you've talked more about neurodivergent as
Mhm.
opposed to uh, not neurologically typical or
Yes.
non-neurotypical?
Yeah.
I quite like this. I
Yeah.
quite like this.
Where
It really
typical is
helps
one
to,
branch.
yeah, correct,
Yeah.
correct. And so we've started to realize this is not the case. You can't just have it so straightforward and black and white like that.
Yeah. The one
Yeah.
way, which is quite interesting, that a student was actually, we were talking about it, and the student actually came up with this, and I kind of tossed it around in my brain a little, but I like it. She was saying, the same way that you get that plagia will work if you put too much pressure on the one part of the bone that the rest of the skull has to find a way. It has to grow in a certain way to be able to accommodate what's going on. She was like, this is very much the same as this neurology in these kids, where it's stopping in one direction but it will find a way. It's just that it now looks different and it's finding a way in a different direction. But the thing is, that different direction maybe doesn't come across because of sort of the rigidity of how we go through learning, the rigidity of what we expect through life. I thought that was really interesting because, like, it's like a way of like nature will find a way.
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, in the words of the immortal Jeff Goldblum, life will find a way.
Find a way.
You do it much better than I do. That's good. Hey, so that raises a very good question. I like to ask about these ones in terms of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Has our method of educating kids driven a process that's going to promote more left brain development at an age where we're not
Yeah.
particularly ready for it? What age do they start formal academics over in the UK then, Mike?
It's look, it's about a year earlier than they start in South Africa. So you've got, I mean, and
Oh,
you've got little ones also. You've got little ones off to sort of preschools, just the pre-primaries as fast as they can, because also the cost that becomes free then here. So, you're gone from this massive cost of like a nursery, and they move over very, very, very quickly. And also, I mean, just society-wise, most households are double income. So most people are out working and doing.
yeah,
And even if you take the I work from home, you still got to work from home. So being off at
correct.
nursery is an important thing. And then they move off into that. And exactly as you say, it's at this time where right brain is the thing that's supposed to be flourishing and going, and they can't tell the difference, between what's fantasy and what's real, and because it's supposed to be like that in the beginning, and then you're supposed to get all the left brain stuff going.
Yeah, we're very similar down here in Australia. We start
Mm.
um, formal education at 4 years old.
Mm.
So it's, mind you, formal education thankfully has now taken a step away from, okay, you will sit down and we're going to teach you how to read.
Mm.
We will teach you
Yeah.
mathematics. It's more as you progress into it, then those concepts will be nourished.
Okay.
Although, I'm seeing more and more pushing for reading, writing, mathematical skills at 4, 5, 6 years of age.
Mm.
And it's just so early,
Yeah.
just so early.
Well,
There's something I really love at that 4 to 6 year age. Do you find I absolutely love playing around with kids' imaginations at that stage,
mhm. Yeah.
giving them the most ludicrous answers possible
Yeah.
and seeing if they can actually start to distinguish, is this actually the truth? I'll never forget, I had one kid and I was working on her sacrum
Yeah.
and I've said, oh, there's a little bit of a tight spot in your tailbone. And she goes, why is it called a tailbone? I don't have a tail. And I said, well, you used to, but your mum pulls it off when you're first born. And your face right there is precisely the face that the mum pulled. And she goes, Christian, I've thanks. I've got some serious explaining to do. And just I love doing that kind of a thing, just to get people out of that mindset of this is the set or expected answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give
Mhm.
something ludicrous and engage a bit
Yeah.
of right brain
Yeah.
fantasy.
I
Put it out
think
there.
you bring up such an important topic. I was putting together a communications course the other day, and we were talking about the fact that kids, people as in general, but kids particularly, and especially when you're looking for a history from that sort of 4, 5, 6-year-old group, where they're in that interesting group where you want to get the history from mom, but you want mom behind the child. So you want the history from the child, and then you want is this nonsense from the parent behind them. But the interesting thing is that they're not good with facts and figures, but they are
Ah,
amazing with storytelling. And if
yes.
you can
If,
start to, yeah, if you can engage it,
if you let
you
them.
have to create the environment that allows for the story because they have been primed generally. You're gonna go to the chiropractor now. You need to tell them everything. Don't forget when this happened and that happened, and you need to tell, and then you'll get the parent sort of like poking facts at them. Well, the worst thing that happens is when they say something, the parent goes, "That's not quite right," and you can see they just go, and then they just sit. So, like, one of the things that I look for is to try and open up the story as much as I can, and
Yeah.
then, you know, and kids are all about like weird detail. They're all about detail, like, and what I love is doing things like saying, okay, so where did you hurt your knee? I was on like Aunt Mavis's house, and they'll be like, you know her. I'm like, yes, of course, because everyone knows everyone in your world. And then like
Yeah.
I was getting taken over by like I got ran into by the dog. You're like, oh my goodness, what kind of dog? Was it a dinosaur dog? And then they're like, yeah, and then the cool ones are the ones that go with you on the trip. I love those because then they'll be like, yes, and it was big and pink and had feathers, and you're like, fantastic. You'll get to the information. It will get there, but you're engaging the kid in a level that they are now happy to engage, and now you're really going to start developing this rapport with them.
Exactly. Especially when you realize that the pink feathered dinosaur dog is actually known as a Featherosaurus rex. So it's very, very
Yeah.
uh,
Phylum
good
Pinky.
on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is it.
Oh, geez.
You gotta, and that's, I suppose, exactly this the antithesis, there's a big word for the morning, of the pediatrician who doesn't like kids, of how much you miss of the context because kids aren't content, kids are context. And if you can understand the context of where they're going, what they're doing, then you can get into the psyche of what's going on. We talk about that with adults all the time when you're dealing with adults. You have to ask questions like, oh, I know you have back pain, but what does that stop you from? What are the important things in your life? But we don't ask kids that stuff. And because they've got a lot of important things in their life, and we need to know what those things are as well to allow them to open up with it. And if you can become part of that, then you get that magic thing of the parent comes in and goes, I don't know, he just wouldn't shut up. He just wants to come. He just wants to come and see you, which is cool because you're part of it. And then they're getting a value out of seeing you that is above just the mechanics. And I think that's the key.
Yeah. I was paid a wonderful compliment by one of the students at a seminar. And she goes, Christian, I know why you work well with kids. And I've gone, oh, yeah. And she goes, you are a big kid.
There you go.
And I'm like, fantastic. So on that vein, Mike, it's early in the morning. I don't know if you're wearing them. What's the sock check this morning?
Oh, yes. Socks are good. Okay. Socks are good this morning. I have Zambuk socks. And anyone from South Africa will know that is Zambuk is the cream that fixes anything. It fixes
Oh,
absolutely anything.
I do know this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we have it down here as well, and it's actually it's through a South African connection that I know about this.
There you go.
That's
Zambuk, any
fantastic.
South African listener, you will know. anything. A heart attack, rub it on your chest. Anything. Zambuk will fix anything. Broken
That's
heart,
it.
same story. You know.
There you go. Well,
Yeah.
it's the equivalent of Windex, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
In honor of the late Val Kilmer, I had to go with something that I
Oh,
had as close as possible.
I love those.
So
Nice Batman socks. Fantastic.
there you
Yeah, Val
go.
Kilmer, the poor guy. Did you see him in the remake of Top Gun?
In the
Oh,
remake of Top Gun or the
well,
second
the
Top Gun?
sequel, the second.
Oh, the
Remake.
sequel. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, with him. Yeah, but
Oh,
because of all the stuff
oh,
and Billy, I know,
that
I
guy
know.
suffered, man.
But I, yes,
Mm.
yes. It makes you kind of wonder how much do actors actually go through? There's so many more
Yeah,
cases of like your dementias, Alzheimer's, all that stuff,
yeah.
the cancers. It must be quite a taxing period of time
I
going
think
through
so.
all of that.
Yeah, crazy.
But yep, there you go. It gets wasted on kids. Not all kids get the Val Kilmer reference to Batman, considering that he was only
Yeah.
Batman in one of
Oh,
them.
so speaking of references, you want to feel old, right? Okay, so I'm explaining one of the ways I explain like changing up the way kids suck. We're working with like a suck dysfunction. I talk about it like Inception. So I say it's kind of like Inception. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a better pattern underneath the pattern that she's using at the moment. And I'm going to reinforce that pattern until that bad pattern just disappears. And then the mom was looking at me and then she was like, "What's an inception?" I was like, oh no. I
Oh,
mean, now I don't know how to explain it to you because that's a whole that's a whole thing, man. And I was like, I'm putting in a good thing and then the bad thing will leave. She was like, "Oh, I got you." I was like, Inception. How do you not know? How do you not know? Anyway,
that's not even that old.
I know.
Oh,
I don't have another reference. What am I gonna? Oh, the best one though.
oh,
Mizzaloo. Do you remember the song Mizzaloo? That
yes,
from
yes,
Natural
yes.
Born
Very fancy.
Killers, right?
Reservoir Dogs?
Natural Born
No,
Killers.
Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction. Didn't he
Yeah,
do that
the
one as
Pulp
well?
Fiction. Yeah. Now I can't even remember my movies from Pulp Fiction. So I was at a party with some friends and little kids, and all of a sudden the song comes on. I was like, "Oh, this is cool! This is cool! This is from Pulp Fiction." And this little kid turns around and goes, "It is not. It is from Big Mama's House too." I was like, "Well, I'm done. I'm done.
Well, Mike,
I'm done.
geez.
What am I supposed to say to that?" I mean, yeah, okay,
Oh,
you're right.
my daughter hit me with "Hey, Dad, you were born in the late 1900s?" Oh,
Oh,
oh, I hadn't heard it referred to as that previously, but
yeah,
jeepers.
yeah. You know those things where they go like 2050 or something is closer than like 1980.
No, don't need to know that.
I know,
Don't need to know. Don't need
I
to
know.
know.
The
Uh,
problem with me
my,
is 1980 is still sort of like 20, 30 years ago.
exactly, but that's because your brain has stopped aging. It's that it's at its peak now. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so it's
Although
yeah.
we had the best prof in Prof. Mervyn Steckel
Oh, yeah.
at uni. Amazing
Yeah.
man. Used to sit and talk about our cases with him, and he would eat a peanut butter sandwich and just spit it at you generally while you were speaking to him. So it was a trip to deal with Doc Mervyn Steckel. R.I.P. What a lovely man. And I remember him one day. We were just having a chat, and out of the blue, he said something that stuck with me forever. He said, "You know what happens? As you age, gravity starts to have an effect on your body." I was like, "Yeah, I get that." And he's like, "The thing is, it's unfair because as all the fun bits start to go down, your brain actually starts to sit properly in your skull and you start to make the good decisions." I was like, "Yeah." I just sort of walked away, a face full of peanut butter, but I walked away with, just this idea of yes, as time goes on, everything falls down. But what that does is it seats your brain nicely out of the sea of hormones, locks it in properly, cranial nerves work, and you can make good decisions.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
I can
I
still smell the peanut butter. The PTSD is
That's
real.
it. That's the other bit that's still stuck to you as well, huh? I like it.
Probably.
Oh, mate, I needed a good conversation with someone like this today.
Oh, me too.
Um, I'm gonna drag you through. The last couple
Okay.
of days, has been entertaining, has been very interesting. Sometimes you get those cases that come through your clinic and you kind of go, oh, okay, this one
Mm.
we're going to pay attention to. A
Yeah.
couple of days ago, I had a 5 week old present. First 2 weeks, so 5 week old, born at 38 weeks gestation, 38 weeks
Mhm.
gestation, 2.2 kgs. So a teeny tiny
Mm.
little bub. And first 2 weeks, absolutely brilliant. From 2 weeks on, started showing signs of breastfeeding difficulties, unsettled behavior, positional preferencing, constantly arching off the breast, can't get comfortable, all this stuff going on. And so I saw them. What's today? It's Thursday for me. So I saw them on Tuesday
Mhm.
and saw them on Tuesday. We've now had um, formula feeds because we can't breastfeed anymore. We're
Mm.
getting breast rejection. We're getting no greater than 20 mils per feed
Mm.
coming in. It's taking 1 hour to complete those feeds.
Yep.
After another hour, the kid's screaming for food again and it's just refusing all this kind of stuff. Parents are spiraling down that P&D
Mm.
path. They've just left. They actually called me from the pediatrician's office. So they were on their
Mm.
way from the pediatrician's office. They were running late for their appointment. And I could hear the kids screaming in the back of the car. And they've said, look, we are still 20 minutes away. And I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, jeepers.
Mm.
I can hear the kid screaming and I can hear the parent's voice. And you kind of go, you know what? Keep coming. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So saw them Wednesday, and this kid, she's in the sixth percentile for body weight.
Ugh.
And I'm like, oh, that's an improvement. She used to be in the second.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's gone up from that definitely failure to thrive kind of a concern to a potential failure to thrive concern.
Moving positively. Okay.
We're going positively, but that was the last measure was taken a month, so 4 weeks prior.
Oh.
Okay, so it's been a long time since. So I've weighed her at 6. I've weighed her again the next day. The mum comes back. She goes, you know what? She slept comfortably for the first time since she was 2 weeks old. She managed to get 60 mils in, then 65 mils in. And I'm like, oh, and then she gets, and then we've regressed to 30 mil.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay. And we've gone right back downhill. And I'm like, okay, that's not ideal. So that was on Tuesday. Came back in on Wednesday, gave me the update on the Wednesday. So yesterday, I'm checking over this kid and the child that was screaming incessantly, at least awake, rousing, moving, all that kind of stuff, had started to turn lethargic,
Mm.
not as responsive, not as reactive. And when you get that kind of a
Mm. Don't like that.
ooh,
Yeah.
something's not quite right here. And the parents, they're saying, no, look, she was so much better after the treatment. This is just this morning. She's not really fed so well. And her nappy's getting a little bit lighter.
Mm.
And I'm like, all right,
Mm.
you get that point, you kind of go, okay, as a chiropractor, we can do certain things. We can improve certain things. Okay, so the parents have already noted that we've seen an improvement in her behavior. She's not crying as much. She was sleeping better. She was more comfortable. However, we're seeing regression.
Mm.
We're seeing feeding rejection going on.
Mm.
And so he had to give the talk.
Mm.
And the talk was, I think you need to go to hospital.
Mm.
Okay, you've been to your pediatrician yesterday, but I have seen this and we know how quickly things can go downhill.
Mm.
And sure enough, so they went through the hospital. Hospital then sent her back home again, which was
Mm.
interesting without doing any investigation. So I've
Mhm.
called again this morning. I've said, what's happening? And they've gone, we actually need to rub her to wake her up to start feeding now. I'm like, no, stop, hospital now.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that's currently where she's at. She's at hospital.
Mhm.
And it makes you kind of go, oh, I really, you kind of get that sense of, I feel not like a failure. You kind of go, I wish I could have done more.
Mhm.
But, there are only certain things that you can do. You get to a certain point where you've got to take into consideration that whole big picture as to what's going on. This kid's now flagging me for failure to thrive. even though she's showing up all these other signs. She had the rotated sacrum going on,
Mm,
she had the plagiocephaly going on, the neck issues, the shoulder issues, and these are all ticking little boxes to me saying, hey, look, there is a musculoskeletal component
mm,
here. We can address this. However, we need to address that failure to thrive component first. We've got to get in and get her feeding, you know.
mm,
So I suspect this little child is going to have one of those nasogastric tubes inserted because
mm,
I actually think she has a degree of esophagitis.
mm,
So she's trialed different formulas, but she's been on a formula for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks
mhm,
that is casein based. And
mhm.
casein and reflux and unsettled babies, they go very well together.
Yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah,
put me in a bit of
yeah,
a
yeah. Yeah, it's such an interesting one, just sort of like dissecting that because you go through um what's like the change, and it's almost like that body decision of getting rid of the roadblocks, getting rid of the musculoskeletal roadblocks, going, okay, it feels like this can work. The body going for it and then going, no, it doesn't work. And then making almost that body level biochemical decision to get right down into that other side of the vagus, get right to the other side of parasympathetic, get right into the shutdown, and almost go, it's now not worth like what's the word I'm looking for? If you were to equate it with money, it's not worth spending the money to wake up and feed because I'm going to expend more energy waking up
more
and
energy.
feeding. It's now we go into, and I always remember seeing this wonderful chart around like colicky babies where they had this purple line that shot up the top, and it was about crying over the hours of the day,
I
and they called them the purple stormers. The purple stormers shout and carry on whatever, and they were like, yeah, they're irritating, whatever. And then they had like the green, whatever, this, that, and right at the bottom they had this line that just carried on that didn't wake up, and those were called the blue angels. And the Blue Angels were really who you had to watch out for. Because the Blue Angels either came in with a parent going, I don't know, they're the easiest baby in the world. I don't know, they just sleep for 7 hours. Or they are a purple stormer and then they just hit right down into Blue Angel and then they just stop going. And I've always remembered it's like dogs fighting. When it gets quiet, really quiet, that's when the real
yeah,
problem is going on.
yeah. And that's what this kid ticked into. Because prior to that, I'm like, you know what? There are aspects that we can address here, but the feeding refusal,
Yeah.
that's a tricky one
Yeah.
because that I don't always see tie in to a straight musculoskeletal. If the content has gone in that we've eaten and it's created that allergic response,
Yeah.
you can't easily adjust the allergy away. You can't
Yeah.
adjust the burnt esophagus to
Yeah.
make it unburnt. Like we can certainly do things to help make it more manageable or tolerable. However,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it was actually really fortuitous, that we were planning to get this kind
Yeah.
of thing happening and that this kid's booked in because I actually wanted to ask you, there was a great question that
Yeah.
popped up. I'm gonna toot your horn a little bit. That sounds a bit. I'm gonna raise you up a little bit here. It's
You can't,
okay. I play
you
the
can't
trumpet,
say
so
it
I'm
and
allowed to.
then take it back. You were going to toot my horn.
That's it. That's it. I love your pediatric network.
Oh,
You've got
cool.
a great little Facebook network here. And it
Hmm.
was there was a comment that came up not so long back, and you were talking about addressing the vagus nerve, and you were going, let's work on that dural talk, let's
Yeah.
talk, work about vagal sheath, all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And this kid, I'm like, this is one of those things. Unfortunately, they went
Yeah, yeah.
downhill courtesy of other things.
Hmm.
But it made me kind of go, you know what, Mike? I would love to hear your thoughts in regards to this dual talk. Okay, I've
Yeah.
done the basic SOT kind of stuff, and I've got a good understanding of dual systems, dual attachments,
Mm.
all that kind of whatnot. But
Ah, yes.
you work with that guy, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. That's the big
I've
boss man, Steve Williams. Absolutely. Yeah,
before
yeah.
He needs to print his books so the thing is facing the right way. His
Yeah.
spine text is the opposite to every other book on my shelf.
It's so
And
that you
it's
remember it, man.
I don't remember it. I look at that and my OCD goes, it's facing the wrong way. Do I keep it there? I'm tempted to take it out and lay it down this way.
Yeah,
But then the
absolutely.
title page is on the wrong side. But anyway,
Amazing.
you work with this guy,
It's
and
amazing.
he
I'll
he
give him a
does
I'll give
do.
him a plug if you want to. He's actually got that book on an online version at the moment, which you can
Is
get
the
hold of.
spine the right way
It
around?
you can I'm sure you can change the spine. You can do what you like with the spine. But yeah,
So
yeah. So that's been a
so
big part of what
talk
we
to
do.
me. Yeah, crap. I would love to hear some of your insights behind this one. What's your aims? What's it all
Yeah.
about? Talk to me about dural talk.
Okay, so first thing is to look at it in terms of, and this I got from a wonderful friend of mine, Anna Papadopoulou, who works with me on the Royal College. The first thing is to look at the autonomic nervous system slightly differently. Instead of looking at it like it's sympathetic, and then the sympathetic goes away because the parasympathetic kicks in, and then that's not how it works. And she gave me this wonderful just imagery of an old time tap with the two taps, one on either side, and the middle spout with the water coming out. This is how it works. You've got a parasympathetic tap and you've got a sympathetic tap. And they're all working at the same time, but sometimes you push the parasympathetic, and that changes the heat of the water. Now, it has to do with your brain and your buffering as to how hot you can deal with water and how cold you can deal with water. And if you have prenatal stress as a baby, if you have allergies, if you have restriction around things like Vegas, if you have a poor microbiome, you have all of these things, your buffer for changing the temperature of water becomes different. It becomes less. So a lot of the time what happens is you've got a lot of hot with the sympathetic going, and the cold of the parasympathetic, there's a little bit of a problem. The tap's a little iffy to turn. And a lot of the time, that's where the vagus is not shooting into the system the way that it should. So a lot of the time, what we're trying to do is the sympathetic will do what it does, but we're trying to open that parasympathetic tap to change the temperature of the water so that it becomes a lot more,
Mm.
they can deal with it better. Now, this took me flipping forever to understand because your vagus nerve leaves via the jugular foramen, which is wonderful. It leaves the jugular foramen with a whole bunch of other nerves. It leaves with the spinal accessory. It leaves with glossopharyngeal, and
Yep,
it's got the vast
correct.
majority of the blood supply drainage that comes out of the skull from there. But the thing is that all of those nerves are covered in the dura, right? So that
Yep.
dura comes around and goes around the sheaths of all of those nerves. If you start creating tension in that internal system, and I suppose just to preface this, you've got the outer layer of the dura, which connects on the inside to every bone. So it's almost like connecting on the inside of the bowling ball. Very tight attachment to foramen magnum. And then you have the inside of the dura, which slips through that and goes right down to the sacrum, which means that a torque at the sacrum can create tension up at the top. Top tension can create tension down at the bottom. And this is essentially where we get sort of category one, category two, if you want to think about it in terms of SOT. The idea being that the more tension you have around there, the more tension goes through into that dural sheath around the nerve. And the more tension there messes with the blood supply to the nerve. That is where the problem comes in. You get a lack of blood supply to the nerve, and now the nerve can't function the way it's supposed to. And the big thing with vagus is that it's this massive conduit down between stomach and brain. And of course, 80% of it is afferent. So 80% of it is actually information from your stomach going up to your brain, telling your brain what to do so that you can respond properly. And a lot of the time you don't get that because you've got that tension around the blood supply. It can get caught in a number of places, though. That just tends to be the big place that it gets caught. But then you get the mechanical catches. So you get the mechanical catch around SCM, because it's right inside, it runs right down through that sheath. You get the mechanical catch underneath a clavicle. So if you're thinking of stuff like shoulder dystocia through a birth, or if you're thinking of things like kids with torticollis, those kind of things, all of that's going to catch. The other area that it tends to catch is into the crus of the diaphragm. So those are the areas that are really important to work, but then so is the sacrum. Number one, in terms of the mechanics of what that does to the reciprocal tension membrane in the skull. But secondly, because of the parasympathetic fibers, which is a little bit of a fight because the microanatomists, as Steve always talks about, they're not too sure actually if the lumbosacral nerves are actually sympathetic or parasympathetic. Now, there's a whole debate. Classically, that's the other sympathetic side, and that's the sympathetic side that's going to go to the lower part of the intestine. Now, the idea is to be able to turn that tap on as much as you can. So you want to get as much free flow in that area as possible. So you want to, and this is where the key is. That's where you're aiming, but it's a global system that you're trying to open up. And this is where I find I went wrong for years and years. And when I teach, this is where people also go wrong. They go, it's an occiput that's tight, or it's a temporal bone that's rotated. No, these are levers into the fact that the system itself has tension. And we want to relieve the tension on the whole system. So when you work with cranial and when you work with the sacrum, you work the rest of that dural idea, you're working with this overarching idea of relieving tension from the top to the bottom. And as we've talked about many times, you don't start at the top. You start at the bottom. So any times I'll run you through basically if I have a kid that there's a vagus issue on the go. And then I'm going to add something else at the end, which I really enjoy. Start down at the sacrum and make sure that you've got proper movement inside that. Make sure that's not talking up. From there, I go right up to the upper cervical spine because the attachment of then your falx cerebelli comes down to C1, 2, and 3. And that rotation, even at a C3, is going to cause a reciprocal tension membrane rotation up into tension up into the system. And I think what's also important to say is none of this is wrong. This is the clever, correct response to your body tightening up. This at the top is those reciprocal tension membranes are paying the credit card for other things that are happening. The problem is that they are the response. So you can't fix the response. You've got to fix the cause. So we go right from the sacrum, upper cervical spine, base of the skull, and then up into the vault, into the sutures. But here's another really interesting thing. And this I really wanted to catch on because you were talking about this in your history, and a lot of these things kicked in. I met one of the most amazing chiropractors in Netherlands when I was there, Jan Hoover. An amazing chap. He used to be a geologist, published papers as a geologist, then moved into chiropractic. And his whole theory is that the majority of the things that happen with babies in this age group are all, well, if not everything, is brainstem organized. So problems are brainstem problems. And he has this beautiful theory of tension of the suboccipitals creating an issue in the brainstem and in the cerebellum that the cerebellum can't rein in the vestibular nucleus. So what ends up happening is you have this vestibular nucleus, which is putting way too much information into the brain, and that gives you these hyperextensions. It gives you the issues down into the lower esophageal sphincter via the vagus nerve. But what he's done is gone one level higher and gone, if it's a brainstem dysregulation, let's get that working as well. So when I work with vagus problems, or I work with a baby that's got an autonomic issue and they can't quite bring themselves back down to earth again, that's what I do. Down into the sacrum, upper cervicals, base of skull, up into the vault, and then I look into the suboccipitals. And he's got a fascinating way of doing it, which is the activator, but tangentially, so sideways. And the activator sideways, we were at his practice and he ran through all of this with us. It is phenomenally interesting. So what he's doing is going over the suboccipital attachments and he's got
Transversely across them.
transversely across. So I wish I had my activator
Yes,
with
so
me.
he would be activating more Golgi tendon
Yes,
organ as
yes,
opposed to afferent
exactly.
spinal.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So he's getting that to come down so that almost if you look at like rectus captus posterior major with a major bridge, you look at the input. And also what he says is because input to the cerebellum is not really coming from a visual part with babies, and you don't also have the visual part to be able to offset bad proprioceptive information. So it's poor upper cervical proprioceptive information that is then causing this. I mean, it's the Purkinje cells into the cerebellum, and then them not being able to hold back the vestibular nucleus. And once you get that vestibular nucleus under control again, then everything starts to calm and you don't have all this back arching. And the research on it is wonderful. It's really, really good. He's got a lovely trial that he's done on this, and he's got a follow-up paper to it as well. And he's got a 5 point score that he uses that I put into my history now. That's my history form, and it all has to do with things like: are they hard to be able to put down from you once you moved? Do they not like the car? Anything vestibular that should be calming, that for them is like this. That's just the version that comes out from there, but the rest of it becomes these infantile functional gastrointestinal problems.
That's I loved listening to that. That was a precursor to what you're going to be presenting down here in Australia
Yeah,
not so long in not too long time,
yeah,
eh?
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Nice little stuff. That and here's I find that really interesting. So the Golgi tendon is what? It's a inhibitory reflex arc, isn't it? So it
Mhm.
actually decreases the amount of stimulation. I find this really intriguing
Mm.
when you look at it from a neurological standpoint, thinking about that right cortical, we want to have increased right cortex. But what you're doing there is decreasing left afferentation. You're decreasing left as opposed to increasing right. I've had you've talked. Actually, I'm taking notes. I like this. It, you I work very, very similarly. So we've
Mm.
discussed it many
Yeah.
times, starting from the sacrum there. But I found that fascinating. You were talking about vagal points of mechanical entrapment as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
SCM, SCM. So that SCM is typically, well, it's a flexor muscle, isn't it?
Hmm.
So that flexor muscle, it's a it's almost like a receding back into that primitive posturing. So we're seeing an overrepresentation of what is it, the rubronuclear tract,
That's the one. That's the
rubrospinal
one.
tract.
Cerebrospinal.
So we're seeing an overactivity of that rubrospinal tract coming through, which causes that SCM contracture, which is typically that is an ipsilateral inhibitory pathway. So you need to inhibit that one from an ipsilateral
Mm.
standing, which is now that's really interesting that you work on calming
What I find
that.
as well to my window into this floor of the mouth fascia, which
Oh,
tends to get tight in terms of these babies that can't suck. And then what ends up happening is, and this is just my sort of extrapolation into this, is obviously with that, with platysma, with all of that tension running across there, that's where that nerve can get tucked into as well, because it runs in the fascia
yeah.
runs through the SCM. And this is what ends up happening with a lot of these babies is that because that floor of the mouth is tight and you've got this vagus that's not responding properly, they need to really ramp up that vagal stimulation to be able to get anything going. But here's the kicker with these guys. Feeding gets them food. Let's just say feeding does get them food, but it doesn't get them the vagal response they're looking for. And a whole thing track that I'm on at the moment is half of feeding is for your stomach and half of feeding is for your brain. And the idea is that these are the kids that stay on long, way after they should. These are also kids that want to go back and back and back because, and as I had it explained to me by a wonderful patient, instead of sitting down at Christmas dinner and having the socialized part of eating, they're running into Macca's for one chip at a time. But they keep doing it and they keep feeding themselves. But at the end of the day, there's no social side to it. And all it is they're stressed all the time. And those are the kids that
Mm.
stress while they're feeding and they stress after they're feeding because they couldn't get the vagal pop, which is then afterwards where they start to valsalva because the valsalva gives you the increased vagal tone. And then they sit and they push and then they reflux. So that generally is my track. And then reflux is just fluid mechanics on top of what the system is doing. So that's
Mm.
my sort of understanding of it at the moment.
Yeah, I like that. I see that very frequently, that non-nutritive sucking kind of activity.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have considered it as being, I look at that as a pain relieving behavior. So they're doing something. I wouldn't think about it as being it's an attempt to increase vagal activity or vagal response
So, vagal development and breastfeeding happen at the same time.
simultaneously.
And the whole idea of breastfeeding is that it's vagal exercise. It's more vagal
Hmm.
exercise than bottle feeding just because of the difference in the mechanics that you use. But at the end of the day, that movement is vaguely activating. Now, here's the kick, and this is what took me again forever to understand. I know I say that a lot, but there's a lot that takes me forever to understand. It's not
I understand.
about it's not about kids that are in this continuous fight or flight story. What happens with that sucking, not kicking the vagus in means more along the lines of this. It means that because when you go into breastfeed, you have to drop your vagal tone, right? Because you're relaxing. As you go into breastfeed, you have to drop it slightly because you have to do something now. So you have to be
Hmm.
active. So the parasympathetic must come down slightly and allow you to breastfeed. But as you move away, that's when the vagal brake has to come back again. And that's where it goes wrong with these guys. If they haven't stimulated it enough, this foot off and on the vagus is not working correctly. And that's where you get these kids afterwards that are all ramped up because the sucking hasn't worked properly. It hasn't exercised the vagus properly. So now you don't have a correct vagal brake.
Mm.
And they
Oh, I
keep
like that
going
term,
back.
vagal break.
Yeah, they keep going back to try and do it. So one of the things is when working with them is to pump the vagal response. So give them more so that it's easier for them to get it. And you can see because kids with retrused jaws, they find it harder. Kids with high palate, they find it harder because they're not getting the tongue or the nipple pushed up into that anterior part of the palate, which is that spot that you hit the vagus on. I shouldn't have made the hand movement.
Yeah.
It was weird. I knew as I made the hand movement, it wasn't good.
Look, the only thing that's going to make it weird is the fact that we're going to be putting this on YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're going to YouTube. Woohoo. That'll be good.
that was a great. And I've just looked down at my notes here, and I've misspelt the word break. Wrong break. You don't want to break
No,
the
no
vagus nerve.
vagal
You want to
break.
break the vagus nerve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
So yeah, I like that a lot. See, a wealth of information, Mike, an absolute wealth of information.
Could you put that in
And
writing to
these,
my wife, please?
yeah, I'll include it with another box of Tim Tams for you as well,
Yes.
just so to really sweeten the deal happening. See, and this is the thing that patient that I was talking
Mm,
about previously, they were ticking every single one of these boxes. We've got the tonicity of the SCM, we've got that occipital restriction going on. So
mm.
occipital, I look at the actual articulation, but that articulation is going to influence jugular foramen.
Of course.
And we've got that. We had an anterior shoulder going on. And I sit there and I go, how on earth does a 2.2 kg baby born via a C-section end up with a shoulder issue? Well, it is dynamically quite easily
Yeah.
as they come out. But could this be another point of vagal entrapment? Not entrapment, catchment going on
Yeah.
that's creating this kind of pained response. This child, as soon as I touched that GHJ, they were screaming their nut off.
Well, there
So
you go.
it was definitely an aggravated, involved area. And then we've got poor feeding going on. We're taking an hour to complete the feed.
Yeah.
All of these little
Mm.
things suggestive. You know what's even more fun?
Yeah.
This kid had a great big sacral sinus going on as well.
What?
So yeah,
Oh,
and you kind of
gee.
go, ooh. So already there's a compromise
Mm.
to their dural system. And you
Yeah.
kind of go,
Oof.
So
Already, yeah.
thankfully, simple sacral sinus, so we could see the base
Mm,
of it. It was
okay.
it was deep. It
Yeah,
was deep.
but it wasn't
However, they've
through.
had ultrasound. They've had ultrasounds, and they were able to see the bottom of it. So it's not
Nice.
continuous through,
Good.
but it does still provide that point of
Yeah.
weakness,
Yeah.
an issue, something to
Absolutely
happen
right.
there.
Well, I want to pull you back to something that you said, which I think is just so important, especially for maybe new grads, but maybe not new grads. But I mean, it made an impact on me, so maybe this is important. Where you said, as a chiropractor, you get to that point with a case like this where you feel like I want to be able to do more. I want to be able to fix more. And you kind of feel a little hamstrung where you go like, I can't adjust away the allergy. I can't. And that makes all the sense in the world. And I think one of the things to be able to take on board with this is to be able to go. You then telling them, you got to go back to the hospital. You've got to go back. Like that becomes your
Your
primary
mandate.
job to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And I think we kind of get a little stuck on the job is in the office and the job is adjusting them. Again, it's like the whole dural system. It's not the one thing, it's the global problem. Globally, what does this child need? I can send them to where, I can force the issue. They've got to go back. Because at the end of the day, and I
Yeah.
mean, you're a prime example of this, your understanding, the scope of your understanding has to be wider than the scope of your practice. Because that then
Yeah.
allows for you to be able to actually help, not adjust, do the actually help. And actually
Yeah.
helping is a much bigger thing because that's like a real world data. At the end of the day, if you were to say to the mom, what has the interaction been there? Like the interaction, that was the thing that changed it. Was it the sacrum adjustment? I don't care. The outcome, and sometimes your job is to adjust. Sometimes your job is to manage expectation. And sometimes your job is to push and go, no, they haven't, you need to go back again. And I think,
Yeah.
taking that on board as job absolutely well done is really important because sometimes you'll feel like I failed this kid. But at the end of the day, you got to take this much wider view and go, no, no, that was my job in this
Yeah.
setup.
Yeah, and that's precisely. So when I finished with this patient, the first thing I did is I spoke to my wife,
Mm.
and I said exactly that. I said, "Oh man, I wish that there was something that I could have done more."
Mm.
And my wife, that one,
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
absolutely amazing. She said, "Imagine if you didn't know what you knew,"
exactly. Exactly.
and
And you
that's
said,
that whole.
come back on
Oh,
Thursday, come back on Friday, come back on Monday. And this just,
not
it
only
just
that.
deteriorates.
Yeah. It was a case of this is my phone number, call me.
Mm.
If you need to talk with anyone, call me.
Yeah.
It was very
Yep.
profound. The dad on his way out said, I want to thank you so much for listening.
Mm.
It wasn't thank you so much for stopping my car from trying crying. Thank you so much
Mm.
for fixing the problem that's in front. It was thank you for listening.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. There you go.
So it's really
Uh,
it does take that little step. I still would have liked to have been able to say, hey, yes, great, done,
yeah.
fixed. But you know what? This is one of the things when you're working with kids is this may be one of the avenues that you have to take, is that it's some other
Yeah.
involvement may be completely necessary. Is that a
Yes.
bad thing?
No, well, I mean, no, not in the slightest. And also, if you look at, yeah, your hair is doing some interesting stuff. If you look at, and I love looking at it this way as well, because we flip the table completely. What we look for and what I'm really happy about in my area is I've got people that will refer to me because they realize that this becomes like I've got a wonderful tongue tie practice that we work with. And what started to happen is they're now referring babies before the cuts because I might be able to do the soft tissue work,
Yeah,
release that, and then they go back and they either go, yes, there is a focal point of tension or there isn't, or whatever the case is.
correct. It's
But
that structural versus functional type of thing.
exactly.
Mm.
And their thought process is that the best place, time, money, whatever that this child can spend is to go there. And I think if we expect that from other professions, we must also be quite happy to go, you know what? the better place for this child to be right now is here. And I think that takes us out of my patient, this patient, and it takes us into this thought process of how do I best help the person in front of me? And I think you get away from that, like, you're not faking it, you know? You're
Yeah.
not, there's no fakery around this. There's no, if I could just educate them more in chiropractic. It's not that. It's that my understanding shows me that they now need to be here. And that's perfect. And I've, without fail, 20 years of doing this, have always found that if I refer someone off to the right place at the right time, they come back or they send someone back. So it's never a case of that you are losing a patient. You've done the right thing, and that will come back.
Nail on the head. Absolutely brilliant. Couldn't.
I'm as surprised as you. I am as surprised as you.
Oh,
I'm
geez.
profound in
that
the
was
mornings. What's happening?
profound in the mornings. There you go. Whereas I look like a mad. Yes, I can get the full mad scientist going on. This is, yeah, that's something
We got to
else.
get you the moustache, and then you've got the whole
Oh,
Sonic look, the whole Jim Carrey
I,
Sonic look.
yes. I
But
used to be able to grow an afro. And
yeah,
I'll never forget I did that. Yeah, yeah. I'll put a picture up somewhere.
can't
And
wait.
I actually did. There was a scene in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, where he
Yeah.
had his hair all funky like that, and I was able to shape it, and it looked exactly like that. It was hilarious. These days, I just look like what's that guy's name? Richard from IT, the IT
Oh,
crowd.
Richard Iwadi? Yeah.
Hey, what? That's the one.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
tried turning it off and back on again?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yep.
good.
It
So good,
looks just
man.
like that.
I love Richard Iwadi.
Oh,
He's amazing. He would be that pediatrician. where,
no.
where he'd be like, well,
Oh, right, right. The good
this is yeah,
pediatrician, not the.
yeah. This has been what's gone wrong. And I'm afraid that's all I have to say about that. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have
Well,
you
nice
tried
to
turning
see
it
you.
off and back on again?
I'm going to say that. I'm going to use that in practice. When I get the right parent, we try turning it off and on again. I like that.
Yes, yes. Please choose your victims carefully.
Yes,
You know?
exactly. You don't want the literal types for that. Oh, it's good. It's good. It's good. This was wonderful. This has been way too long coming, but dear listener, we have a plan. We have a sneaky plan. Is that we are going to be a lot more regular again because we've all come back to our normal sort of day-to-day lives. So yeah, hopefully we'll be once a month thing this. Yeah, that'll be
Once
good.
a month thing.
Be good. Cool.
And
Like that.
on YouTube, on the Spotify's,
Hmm?
do we even hear live streaming in the future, Mike?
Oh, that'd be good
Would that be
actually.
ambitious? I don't
Yeah,
mind that this
yeah.
time.
Book your tickets for the live show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Let us
that'll be
know.
good. Yeah. Questions from the crowd. Yeah. Virtual tomato
Terrific.
throwing. That'll be amazing. I look very, very forward to that. Folks, thank you very much for spending your time with us here on Two Paed Chiros. It's always nice to be able to shoot it with you. Remember, if you have any questions, twopaedchiros@gmail.com is where you can send those. Otherwise, we will be back with you pretty soon for another stunning episode of Two Paed Chiros. Thank you very much, Christian. Always lovely to hang out.
And you too, Mike. Thank you so much.
Well.